Okay, y'all, thank you so much for joining us. I'm pleased to welcome you to our first Mind Your Career webinar of 2017 entitled, Would I Benefit from Coaching? My name is Lucy Sandell, and I'm the Associate Director for Career Development at the Alumni Association. I'm excited by this topic because, like many of you, I'm thinking, this is a new year. I don't have all the answers with regard to my career development. Would coaching help me to get to the next level? And if so, what can I expect from the experience? You and I need to look no further. It's my privilege to introduce you to our presenter today, Chicago alumnus, Tony Mayo. Tony is a dual alumnus from the college and the School of Business with nearly 25 years of coaching experience. He brings to us a diverse background, including, but not limited to, an inventor with U.S. patents. We'll need to know a little bit more about that, Tony. A best-selling author and a lecturer at the college, graduate, and executive level. Now let me welcome Tony. Thank you, Tony. Take it away.
Hello, Lucy. I appreciate the introduction. All right, so today we'll be talking about can I benefit from coaching? These are the topics that were in the announcement. Should look familiar to you. If not, maybe you got on the wrong bus. Time to get out and find the webinar you intended to be part of today. If along the way there's a topic that wasn't on the list that occurs to you, feel free to type it into the chat window, and at an appropriate time Lucy will pass it along to me and we'll address other questions, concerns, rumors you've heard about coaching, and I'll do my best to tell you about that. I'll be stopping several times for questions as well. My approach to this is, since I've been asked to talk about my profession of a quarter of a century in a little less than an hour, is I'm going to trot past things pretty briskly. But I want you to notice anything that you feel like you didn't grasp or I didn't handle in depth enough. Type that in the chat window. I'll go back to that topic, talk about it a little bit more. That way I don't bore people with too much detail on things you're not really listening for, and you'll give me some feedback on what matters to you. Also, since I can't possibly say everything I know or have even written about these topics we're going to get to, I've set up a web page, tonymayo.com/career webinar. Now, career-webinar is case sensitive, so you want to make sure that's all lowercase. And there'll be links there to all the articles that I refer to. I'll also leave that link up on the screen at the lower left-hand corner so you can see it at any time. Well, the first question, of course, is why are we talking about coaching? Well, for one thing, it's growing, and it's been growing fast. This chart is a neat little tool that's available to anyone from Google Labs. It's called their Ngram, and it will search for words or phrases in every book that they have digitized since, I think, someplace in the 1700s. And you can see here that executive coaching has been getting mentioned a lot more often since the early 90s, which is when I got involved. It's probably a coincidence. But we're talking about it partly because it's just getting so much attention. The other reason is a lot of people, especially people at high levels in organizations, are looking for specific results by using coaching. So this Stanford University survey shows the kinds of things that CEOs and their boards of directors are hoping the executives get from coaching. Again, I'm moving quickly. This chart is linked from the page mentioned on the lower left of the slide. It's growing, it's in demand for specific reasons, and it's effective. Korn Ferry International did these surveys and showed almost unbelievable numbers. I mean, how many products or services can improve the performance of someone in their job, in their main work activity, 96% of the time. So it can be, when well done, be remarkably effective. So far, I've done something you probably shouldn't do in an academic environment, which I've been talking about the importance of a topic without really defining what it is. Coaching is one of those things that it's sometimes easier to say what it's not. So let's start from there. Coaching is not consulting. For our purposes, consulting is when someone applies specific skills to create specific deliverables. Perhaps doing that while they're doing sort of on-the-job training or technology transfer with the people in the client organization. So easy litmus test between coaching and consulting. Consulting has tangible deliverables. Coaching doesn't, which is one of the reasons I'm happy to be in coaching after some years as a consultant. Coaching is not training. Training is transferring knowledge from one cranium to another so that person can presumably do the kinds of things that the trainer is doing. As you'll notice if you listen to me for any period of time, I'm very interested in the wisdom which is embedded in the history of our language. Training is from the word trail. And the idea is a trainer will pull you along a specific trail that they're familiar with. So training is taught by someone who's traveled a certain path to teach you to travel that path. Very similar is mentoring. Now it's interesting that we put an ing on this and we refer to mentees as people who have mentors. But since I'm talking to a University of Chicago audience, which is very well read, I know most of you realize the origin of the word mentor. Mentor was an elderly, life-experienced friend of Odysseus, whom Odysseus asked to keep an eye on and help out Odysseus' son Telemachus while he was off fighting the Trojan War and having his adventures on that long, long trip home. So this entered the language as someone being your mentor, an older person who's sort of been on your path and can give you some guidance and support. Coaching also is not friendship. Go to your friends for affection, distraction, companionship. Friends can support you in your activities. For instance, a friend is somebody who helps you move your furniture. But a good friend is somebody who helps you move the body. Okay, weak attempt at humor maybe. Now all these things I'm listing here, consulting, training, and a few others, I don't mean in any way to devalue those. They're wonderful things. They're effective. They can make life richer, more worthwhile, but they're not coaching. Coaching is also not managing. Now, there's been a bit of a trend as coaching has increased in popularity to have trainings in coaching for managers or a coaching style manager. But in general, the way people manage is not consistent with how someone would coach. Specifically, looking at the history of the word, managing comes from the Latin word manos, for hand. It means to put your hand on something and move it so that it does the task you want done. Managing was originally used in English for controlling a horse. Someone who's good at managing a horse, they can put the hand on the horse and get it to do the work they wanted done. And you can see how it gradually turned into managing. Coaches do not manipulate their clients to get certain outcomes, certainly not outcomes that are of interest to the coach. Whereas it's a manager's job, and it's a legitimate job to directly influence people to get particular things done. Coaching is not therapy. Therapy is from the Greek word meaning to heal, to give a medical treatment. So therapy comes from the point of view of let's find out what's wrong with this client or patient and then help them fix it. Coaching, on the other hand, starts from the premise that the client is okay, that the client has all the personal resources necessary to live the life they want to live and only need some insights, some tools, some support to apply what they have already. Again, therapy is a wonderful thing. I believe in it. I've, I've taken advantage of it, but it's got a fundamentally different attitude going in than coaching. Therapy's fixing, coaching is you're fine, let's see what we can add to it. And finally, coaching is not advice. And this gets to one of the key salient characteristics of coaching. Coaching is all about helping the person see their own situation, their own resources in a way that they can apply them and use them better. Trying to help that person live their life the way they want to live it. Advice essentially means this is what I would do if I were in your circumstances. Sometimes that can be useful. The catch is the other person isn't in your circumstances, and they don't know what they would do if they're in your circumstances. They're guessing, they're remembering, they're inventing. Again, all those things can be useful. But you have to be careful, because when someone gives you advice, what they're really telling you is how they view the world. They're actually telling you more about themselves and their opinions than they are about your situation. So I've done all these things. I've had the advantage of all of these things. And I even do most of these things with my clients, except therapy. You need a license for that. I'm not going to get in trouble there. But the majority of the value I bring, and much of the time and effort I work with on a client, is none of these things. It's coaching. So far, Lucy, do we have any questions or requests for particular areas that they'd like to have covered?
I guess the group has been so interested in what you've been saying. They haven't typed in questions, but you can type in one right now if you'd like. I have a question. What drew you to coaching? Like, you've been doing this for a quarter of a century, but what was the impetus for you?
It was when let's back up. The president of my company went through a rigorous coaching program. He thought it was wonderful. He said any employee, he'd give the time off and pay the tuition to go through this coaching program. I thought, sure, I'll take it. And that's where I discovered what it was like to be coached. And I got such tremendous results just in a few days during the course in my personal life, in my clarity about my work, that I thought, this is a wonderful thing. I want to learn more about this. So I kept getting more and more coaching. And as I developed, I found that I wanted to be a coach. I wasn't interested so much anymore in being a manager or being a consultant. I wanted to help other people see what was possible in their lives. It's a very intimate and rewarding relationship to coach someone. So that's how I get started, and that's why I keep on doing it.
We have a couple more questions.
Sure.
Somebody wrote, I'd like to hear about options for non-executives to receive coaching. This person is about 10 years into their career. What might there be out there for them?
Well, there are coaches that specialize in different aspects of your life. And as we talk more about what coaching is and how it works, you'll be a smarter, sharper, and consumer of the various kinds of coaches. Any experienced, competent coach is going to specialize. I specialize in owner-operators of established businesses. That's what I was as a profession. That's the people I work with most. That's where I can have my greatest effect. There are people who will coach you around dealing with chronic illness. There are people who will coach you around your marriage. There are people who coach you on health and fitness. Now, I'm using the word coaching precisely. I'm not talking about trainers or consultants. People who actually coach on any aspect. And we'll talk a bit later on about how to find the right coach for you.
Great. If a coach helps a client use their resources better, doesn't this involve some aspects of training and mentoring?
Well, as I said, I do all these things with my clients from time to time. I do my best to label them, particularly advice. I've had a good deal of experience in business. Sometimes they'll be in a situation that looks familiar to me or involves a particular bit of knowledge that I have, the kind of lawyer to use or a tax issue. And I'll say, I'm going to step away from coaching right now. I'd like to give you my opinion on this. Is that okay now? Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no, because they want to keep on digging in on a coaching side. And sure enough, I mean, those things have great value.
And I think one last question before you move on, just because people are excited. Aren't there common principles despite specializations?
There are. There are a few schools of coaching, or I don't want to make that too formal, but there's different approaches to coaching, and there are some fundamental ideas. And we'll get to some of the fundamentals of the type of coaching I do, which works in principle, not just for business owners. Okay? All right. So one more way to get at what coaching is to hear some people who feel like they've gotten results from coaching. How do they describe it? So here's one. So here you can see Nancy distinguishing coaching from advice. Input from many sources and experts, which is good. She's gotten that. She appreciates it. But she said working with a coach was something different, drawing out her own best thinking and helping her see what's the best for herself. And a word that transform is a word you'll hear come up a lot around coaching. The idea of transform is you're not adding anything, you're not taking anything away. You're taking what's there and putting it in a different form that's closer to the purpose. And the most wonderful example I've witnessed of that is to imagine a rosebud. Some people actually like their roses when they are in that bud phase, nice and tight and small. It's a perfect rose at that point. And then as the petals open up, it changes dramatically, but nothing has been added or taken away. It's all the same pieces. They're just in a different form. Here's one more person talking about coaching. And you can see Josh here is practicing two of the distinctions I mentioned earlier. Help me look at the world in a new perspective. So he's in the same business, he's the same person, but he sees things differently. He notices different things, and therefore he takes different actions. One of the key shifts he took on was rather than fixing things, and we all know people who are just firefighters at work. There's always something wrong, they're always jumping on top of that. But there's an endless supply of fires. So he shifted from fixing what's wrong and started to pursue what was possible. Not assured, not promised, just possible. And he said that change of perspective has made all of the difference. I've got a typo over there. I don't know why that word results is still hanging in there. I'd like to be able to coach each one of you so you get that sense of what it's like, because it's a marvelous thing to suddenly realize that you can deal with the same circumstances in a radically different way that's more effective. But here's something that's similar to it. Suppose I had asked you to install a window that meets the following specification. I want it to be 1 foot high, 1 foot wide. Now, I know you're probably not carpenters or contractors on this call, not all of you, but you can visualize what a window would look like that meets my criteria, I suppose. And if you're like most of the groups I've worked with, what you're visualizing is something that looks like that. a square window, 1 foot high, 1 foot wide. And say you install that in my house. Well, I come by when the work is finished and I say, well, it is 1 foot high, 1 foot wide, but it lets in an awful lot of light and heat. What I had in mind was a window that was 1 foot high, 1 foot wide, but half the surface area of the one you've put in. Can you visualize what that window might look like? It looks like that blue square. Chances are many people could not come up with an answer to this. They might even thought there was some trick. I've had people try to do it in 3 dimensions and that sort of thing. But this is a very straightforward solution. I mean, you've seen windows that are like this one, but most of the windows you know about are like the brown one, aren't they? So when I say window, that's what you think of, and your possibilities tend to be restricted by what you know. Knowledge is limited. We all know that. What we forget is it also limits us and limits our thinking. And this is one of the key ideas for coaching. Our knowledge is limited and limiting. Coaching can provide the do edge. Coaching is an intentional conversation. Let's talk about that first. Intentional. There's a reason. There's a purpose. It's not shooting the breeze. It has to do with what the client is trying to get in their life, the experience they want to have. So it's always working around an intention. And it's a conversation. Conversation is a word that's used a lot, but I'm using it in a precise way. Again, looking at the word history, this has 2 Latin parts. Con, and con we probably all know, chili con carne. A con means with. Versare, the root of the versation portion, is a little more obscure. It's a Latin word meaning to change the state of something, particularly to open or close a door. In early English, when the word conversation first came into use, it meant to get together with someone to make something happen, to open or close a door on possibilities. So coaching is an intentional conversation that provides an alternative worldview. A world where windows don't need to be strictly vertical and horizontal. They can be triangles. They can be diamonds. An example that was an experience that was important to me in my early days of being coached. I was a salesperson. It was Christmas time. I sold software. My top prospect called me in the few days before Christmas to say that I had successfully upsold him to a much bigger purchase, but because of that, they were appointing a steering committee to review the whole process, which was going to slow things down. Now, if anybody on this call has been in sales, you know that the last week of the year is when things have got to happen so they can be accounted for in that year. And you can probably imagine what my sales manager said when I told him that they had appointed a steering committee. He said, Tony, get on that phone. Find a way to get that done this year. If you have to go up to New Jersey and sit in on the steering committee, get on the airplane and do it. So I went back to my office, got my prospective client on the telephone, and started asking lots of questions. Who's on the steering committee? When's he going to meet? What are their criteria? And I sort of astrally projected and imagined myself sitting at my desk with decorations and Christmas cards taped up. And I thought, I do not want to be beating this guy up at Christmas time. I don't feel like manipulating him. And I thought, I don't have to do it that way. And I said, Dennis, you've told me that this software is going to help you create the results in the business that you want. And I'm asking you all these questions to help you get it. And he said, Tony, I really appreciate it. I've never made a purchase this size at this company. I'm not sure how it works. You and I are going to figure out the process so we can get it done. Okay, now I'm free. I'm not working this guy over for my purposes. I'm helping him get what he wants. And suddenly all kinds of creativity and energy got loose. That's an alternate worldview. From pushy salesman to helpful expert. So this intentional conversation provides an alternate worldview that allows the client to take appropriate actions. It's not guaranteed actions. It may be something that's completely novel. No one knows what the perfect actions are to take. But we find out what's, given this worldview, given our intention, what would be the most appropriate action to take? And those appropriate actions should always be in service to his or her, the client's chosen possibility. Two important coaching concepts in that portion of the sentence. Chosen. I'm continually reminding clients that they are free. They have choices, more options than they think they do. Sometimes this can be simple, like you don't have to keep that employee. You don't have to lease this new equipment. Sometimes it's a bit more dramatic. I had one client who was very overwhelmed with work and home demands. She called me one day and says, I can't even have a coaching call today. I've got to get my son out of school because he's sick and it's ruining my day. I said, you have a choice. She kind of sighs, oh yeah, I always have a choice. What is it? I said, you don't have to pick up your son at school. She said, well, of course I do. I'm his mother. She says, you don't have to. There are mothers who don't do that, aren't there? They either can't get out of work or they don't care as much. She says, yeah, but I'm going to do it. Why? Because that's the kind of mother I am. Yes, and you've chosen to be that kind of mother. Stop whining about it. It's a choice. The other key concept here is possibility. What have we imagined as a possible way? Again, not guaranteed, but plausible. Something you could imagine could work out. Possibility is a word that came into the language from the existentialist writers. And there's a other side of that coin. The opposite of an attitude of possibility is an attitude of facticity, to be bound and tied down by the facts of the current situation. And that's a choice we continually face. Are we going to fix and rearrange the things we know as factual, or are we going to be moving towards something that we imagine and create in the future? So that's what coaching is. An intentional conversation provides an alternative worldview that allows the client to take appropriate actions in service of his or her chosen possibility. Here's another quick experience that is sort of similar to coaching. Do you know what that picture is of? What does it represent? Maybe this will help. Now you see the frog, right? See the frog now? That's a shift in your worldview. This is an optical illusion that was created by University of Sheffield cognitive scientist Tom Stafford. And when he uses this in his talks, he puts up this high contrast image and says, I'm warning you, I'm about to rewire your brain. Because once you see this image, your brain responds differently to that image. Well, that's the idea of what coaching is. When would I use it? Well, there's something I call the gap. There's some outcome, there's some experience, there's some aspect of life that you sincerely want. You have actually worked towards it over some period of time, and it's not happening. It's mysterious why it's not happening. It's not like you say you want to lose weight, but you continue to live on junk food and watch TV for hours. There's no mystery there. No, you actually did the sensible things. You took advice. You did your research, and it's just not happening. There's a gap between what ought to be happening in your life and what is happening. That's a rich place to explore with coaching. Another one is what I call Groundhog Day. It just seems repetitious. It's the same stuff over and over. It may even be stuff that you once aspired to and now have, but it gets dull if it's the same day after day, year after year. Addressing that with a coach, shifting your worldview can make a big difference. A desire to move to more choice, feeling more freedom. When you feel kind of stuck, responding the same way all the time. Here's an example most people can relate to. Most of us have a relative with whom certain topics are just not worth it. Because if you bring this up, they're going to say X, and they're going to say Y. And they say X, and you say Y, and you've had the conversation 50 times. Let's not do it again. That kind of stuckness, where there are so many constraints and so much history that creativity has gone out of it, good opportunity for coaching. There's this sense that your life or your career is something that's happening to you instead of something being done by you. Some people, after they've been coached for a while, say, I feel like I've moved into the driver's seat from the passenger seat. And as a broad guideline, if there are significant parts of your life that are missing love, joy, and freedom, there's an opportunity for coaching. Because there's almost everything that we do where that love, joy, and freedom can be present with the right approach, insights, and action. It really comes down to one thing. Coaching is about getting better at being human, at being you. The simple logistics of it. The cost, like many services, varies a great deal. Sometimes fees are hourly, like a lawyer or an accountant. Competent beginners often work for $75 an hour, and the prices go up from there. More experienced and effective coaches tend to charge by the month, not by the hour. What I say to my clients is, I don't charge by the hour because I want you to call me when you think you need some help. I don't want you sitting there thinking, is this a $500 phone call or not? Because sometimes it's those little needling things that just don't seem right, that when we dig into them with coaching, comes a fundamental barrier that we can break through. So I said, I pay you by the month. The meter doesn't come on when you send me an email, get me on the phone. So experienced effective coaches charge, in general, $1,000 to $3,000 per month. And that would cover 2 to 4 telephone conversations or internet video contacts. And the prices go way up from there. Some very well-known coaches who have served a particular clientele charge $500,000 per person. And they just do what it takes to get that person where they want to go. Tony Robbins, $125,000 a day. He has $1 million programs. You can spend as much as you have on coaches if you try. So we talked about the cost. The contact time is 2 to 4 hours a month. Calendar time, I always tell my prospective clients, plan on working with me for at least a year. And don't look at what the results are for 6 months minimum. The way it works is, it's not a smooth, incremental set of changes or improvements. What happens is from time to time, there's a big shift towards what you want, breakthroughs. So you plod along for 6 months, seems like nothing's happening. And then bang, you're where you couldn't believe you would have been in 5 years. But it only took 6, 7 months. And those breakthroughs open the possibility for more breakthroughs. So it's various intervals. So minimum 6 months, more like a year. And I have had clients that have been with me for more than 10 years because there's always another horizon, another opportunity that's going to have them re-examine how they approach life. The question is, to find out if it's working, is your life closer to the experience you want? And I'm not just talking about amount of money or other specific measurable results. It's that moment-to-moment experience of life. Are you getting closer to that, or is it happening more often? Plus, take a look at your toolkit. Do you have more and more resources, ways of being that are effective? For example, there's a very popular Imago marriage counseling approach. They have a model for having a conversation with your spouse over difficult issues. That's a powerful toolkit. Many times my wife and I have thought, this is a hard topic, why can't we get anywhere? Pull out the one page, ask and answer in their format, it just works. So that's another way to judge whether you're doing well with your coach. Are you having more tools, more ways of interacting with people that get you closer to your experience? One of my mottos is, one of my guiding lights is, there's a way to say almost anything to almost anybody that works for everybody. But sometimes it takes some work and intentional conversation to find out exactly what that way is. Another natural question is, how long do the results last? Is it as ephemeral as a snowflake? It's more like how long the moon and the stars last. Just as that psychologist said he was rewiring people's brain with the picture of the frog, effective coaching shifts how you see things. And you have that distinction forever. You're going to see this frog now, an hour from now, a year from now. You've got the distinction frog for this situation. Let's take a moment for some questions.
Well, we've got a lot of them. It's really great. Somebody asked, how do you acquire your clients?
Well, I do this. It's almost all of my clients have come by direct referral. People I've worked with, they hear a friend or a colleague discussing some issue, and they recognize it's the kind of thing I can help someone with, so they introduce me. That seems to be typical of coaches. Once in a while, someone finds me on the internet, but mostly it's a person-to-person referral. And when I talk about how you should find your coach, you'll see that's my number one method.
Great. Sorry, I'm going to scroll a little bit because there's a lot. They just all popped up at once. It's like, okay. Oh, this is a question, I guess, not referring directly to your presentation, but somebody was, this is a coaching question. How would you encourage day managers to invest in employees rather than cling to policy like a written contract?
I'm sorry, I missed one word there. There's an adjective before manager?
How would we encourage, or how should you encourage day managers to invest in employees rather than cling to policies, aka the written contract?
Okay. I was really holding my breath because I don't know there are a lot of coaching methods I could convey in this situation, but here is one. It should help in this situation if the person is willing to have an intentional conversation. And it works with a lot of coaching conversations. And that is to talk to the person about what they are trying to accomplish, where they are going. You know, the person, and we don't know. That's one of the biggest changes in my life since I've got involved with coaching. I am no longer satisfied taking action based on what I assume someone else is thinking. I check in. I ask. So check in with this person. Find out what their goals are. You know, maybe they're really motivated by being promoted at their next review. Maybe they're really motivated by fear of losing their job this afternoon. Maybe they are fully invested in the growth goals of that organization. Maybe they want to be liked by the employees. when you can get anyone, even your own boss, focused on their most important intentions, and you have, in coaching jargon, you have a conversation within that space. How can you support that person? How can you help them get where they're going in a way that's consistent with your own intentions and goals? And it's remarkable when you get down far enough to find out what people's real desires are, there's common ground every time. All right, so let's move on, and then we'll do some more questions. So what's it like to be in a coaching conversation? Just nuts and bolts. I'm going to start with the last part of a typical coaching conversation. Towards the end, I'll ask the client something along the lines of, based on our conversation today, what have you noticed and what are you willing to do with that information? What is your insight from today and how will you apply it? What conversations will you have? What habits will you establish? How will you change what you do tomorrow or the next day to apply what we've done? That's the end of the call. The next call, we start with what coaches call clearing. All of us have a lot of things going on in our heads much of the time. If you have any doubts, take a moment now and listen to that voice in your head. And if you're thinking, well, what voice? Why? I don't have a voice in my head. Why is he asking that? It's that voice. It's the what voice that's always going. So I begin the conversation by sort of clearing out just the background of what's been going on. So we have room to work. They just vent, they talk stream of consciousness, whatever it takes to put aside what they've been working on, what they've been worrying about, and what's going through their heads. Then I check in on the previous conversations, insights, and commitment. What results did you get when you had that conversation, when you changed that routine? This is where great coaching can happen. I say, this is where I see my athletes on the field in the game. If it works, okay, you've got it. You've got the insight. If you're surprised by the outcome, disappointed by the outcome, all right, we can work on it some more. Maybe you can find another worldview that's more effective, a conversation that will make a bigger difference. And we do that by introducing distinctions. This is another coaching term of art, distinction. But it's pretty straightforward. When I first showed you that image of a frog, you couldn't distinguish the frog from the background. But after I gave you the clearer picture, you were able to distinguish frog from black dots in the background. And it's that way with a lot of coaching insights. Suddenly you see things that were there all along, but you didn't have the distinction to notice them. Another one of our promised topics, finding, selecting, and getting started with an executive coach. First thing, surprised at this point, have a clear intention. Your why, as Simon Sinek is saying. A referral is the most common. Talk to people who are in situations like yours, people you respect, people who have gotten some results. Find out if they have a coach. And then there's always the Google search. Consult the Oracle. Search on the specialty of the coaches, the locale, their training, whatever you think would matter to you. Ask that prospective coach if they have coached people towards results that are similar to what you want to produce. Sometimes you don't need to do this in a conversation. If you go to my LinkedIn page, you'll see dozens of referrals from clients describing the kinds of results they got. If those aren't the results you want, I'm not your coach. When you do have that first conversation with your potential coach, you want to look for some compatibility, some comfort and ease working with that person, because we all have styles and personalities, but not too comfortable. A coach has to be willing to shake you out of your comfort zone, to probe. If they're more concerned about being liked or having a smooth interaction, you're not getting coached. You're getting stroked. Most coaches will schedule and conduct a free initial conversation or a money-back conversation. So you agree to their terms and conditions. You have your first conversation. If you're not happy, they generally will let you off the hook for paying anything for that. So those are the ways of finding, selecting, and getting started with an executive coach. Here were the planned topics that we went through. I hope we've covered those. If not, if there's something that you're interested in hearing more about, you can let me know. So here's our last call for questions. And all that's left for today is answering your questions.
Sure. There are quite a few. Can you please share with us a real-world case of coaching that you've worked on?
Lucy, anybody has similar questions so you can narrow down what kinds of result or situation to be most interested in?
Sure. Here's an example. Somebody is thinking of or selling their company that they started with their spouse, who is now deceased, and they're wondering what to do next. Is that an appropriate time to think about coaching, or should they?
Yeah, it certainly is,
something else?
And I'm sorry to hear about someone losing their life and business partners. That's going to be a big shift, and absolutely one where you want to get some coaching, because you're being forced to live in a different world now. And if you take your same assumptions and point of view into that, it's not going to be good. So there are coaches around death and bereavement. There are coaches around business and business sales. I've done a lot of that. But they're going to help you see what you have, understand and visualize better where you want to be, and then draw out of you the way to build that bridge between the two. Now, when I talk about build the bridge, that's a little bit too specific and mechanical, especially with the kind of people I coach, but in general with coaching. Sometimes they'll come to me and they want the answer. They want the way to do it. And I say, sorry, there's no roadmap where you're going when you're running a business or building your life or dealing with a shift in career. I don't give maps. I do wilderness survival training, because where you're going is unexplored territory. That can be exciting, as long as you have a good coach. What's next?
One of the questions is, how do you deal with people who've just lost a job and only want to get a job? Is that really where your specialization is? Or are you more working with people that are in a career and are looking to the next level?
Yeah.
Well, my particular specialty is with the owners who are operating their own business. There are people who work with what you're facing, but we need to get precise about what you're facing. If you have an urgent financial or personal need to get a job, that is in the realm of consulting. That's something you can get a book on. You can follow steps to do an optimal job finding strategy, particularly if you just want to find a job very similar to the one you've had. However, if you want to take this opportunity, you have the resources, the personal support, the confidence to take some time to think about what you want to do next, like someone who's just sold a company, great time to do that, then coaching, I would say, is the way to go. So you just want to get back on the track you're on, get a consultant, read a book. There's plenty of them that are great. If you want to take this opportunity to explore the possibility of following your passion or making an impact on the world, that's where coaching comes in.
Great, thank you. And there were questions about, does the University of Chicago provide a list of coaches? And we do on our website. You can look there for anybody who's interested. Another question was, if things are going great or you're comfortable, how would you know if you would benefit from coaching still?
That's subjective and changeable, going great and comfortable. Some people they take being comfortable as a warning sign that they want to get more out of life. But I would use the phrase I had up on the slides earlier. If there are important aspects of your life where you're not experiencing joy, freedom, love, That can be looked at with coaching. And one of the best times to do it is when things seem to be going great. In the early days, when I got to executive coaching in the 90s, it seemed like every article in the popular press was about some high-value employee who had a serious personality defect, like being cruel or being late and that kind of thing. I don't do remedial coaching. My people are very successful, but they realize that there's opportunity with the time and resources they've accumulated to have their life be even more what they'd like it to be. Do you think that addressed it, Lucy? Is that on target?
I think so. I mean, you can only speak to your experience and what you know about other people, so I think that's very helpful. We've got time for another couple of questions. One was, this person's on a school board and they believe, or the board believes anyways, that the administrative team needs coaching. They want somebody who works in the education space. Would you agree with that, or do you think a general coach would be sufficient to help them?
Well, if after watching my presentation, you're clear that what that administrative team could benefit from is coaching, as opposed to some training, better management, consulting, all the other things I listed. If you're really clear that it's coaching that would make the difference you want to see, I would recommend that you get someone who's experienced with management teams of that size, possibly with experience in the nonprofit government area. I wouldn't get any more specific than that. Remember the slide I put up of the client who said, I talk to lots of experts on things, and coaching's different. Coaches don't need to be experts on your job or your particular industry. I have one colleague whose business card's title is Professional Outsider, because we have a different perspective, because we're not experts in your industry, because we're not living in the world you are. We can help you see it differently. If I see it the way you do, I'm not going to do any coaching.
I think that's a good point, because if you're right in there, you probably think, you're doing great. I don't know why anybody suggested me. So that's a good point. I think there was a slide definitely that had stuckness. And the question is, do you think people are stuck because of fear? And if so, how does somebody tackle this?
Yes. Fear is one of the most fundamental drivers of human action. When you dig down for why you do certain things, it generally doesn't take too many layers before you're concerned about losing something. And since I've got a University of Chicago audience, I'll mention behavioral economics. One of the key studies that created behavioral economics was Kahneman, Tversky, discovering that people will do more to avoid a loss than they will to get the equivalent gain. We are more concerned about losing things than gaining things. That's fear. And it makes sense. You know, if we're a creature living in nature and we overlook an opportunity to have a tasty treat or to find a better place to live, there'll be another chance tomorrow or the next day. If we overlook one saber-toothed tiger, game over. So we're very, as one psychologist put it, we are Teflon for good things and Velcro for bad things. So yeah, fear is something coaches are always aware of, always looking for. What is the fear? And then, is there a different worldview that can move that fear from something that is narrowing our vision and raising our stress to something that is motivating to deal with the fundamental issues? Is that too theoretical, or I don't know?
Great, a very U-Chicago answer. Thank you. So last question before we let you go, and thank you so much. You work with, and you've mentioned this a couple of times, you work with owners of companies, very successful people. They tend not to be millennials, although we do have some millennials who've started companies and are doing really well. Do you have experience coaching millennials, or do you tend to
Yeah,
work
I
with
do.
people that are older? Good.
I do.
and it varies. And I have clients that are in. I think the youngest at the moment is 32, and the oldest is 66. Uh, and there are some differences because our cohort, our age, uh, is part of our worldview. And one thing I find interesting about the millennials, in general, we're talking about group norms, not how every particular person is. With many of my clients of older age groups, it takes a while for them to essentially feel safe enough to start thinking about what really matters to them. Their relationships, their impact on the world, and so on. Millennials seem to start there. They start with, I want my life to be cool. I want the people around me to feel good that I'm there. So that part, it saves a lot of time. We know that's what we're working on. The others have to deal with a lot of circumstances before they get there.
Well, great. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. And I'd like to thank everyone who joined in today. We had a nice large group, and I want to send a special thank you to Tony for this informative and I think fun presentation. As a reminder, please watch your email for a link to the recording along with a follow-up survey. It's very short, just asking you what you liked about this, because I'm sure there's nothing that you didn't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. And we also invite you to join us online at careers.uchicagoalumni.org, where you'll find out about upcoming events, our webinar archives, and the jobs board. And if you've hired a Maroon, we want to let you know so that we can send you a nice thank you gift. Thank you again, Tony, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
I appreciate the opportunity. Bye.